Welcome back to LA Fishguys Aquarium Tech Talk, APEX installation at Jim's house. We're on the home stretch now. We've got the APEX all wired up. It's connected to Fusion. We've got all his peripherals and devices connected to it. So the next step is programming. First thing we're going to do is dive into some virtual outlets. Since we've got top off going on and float switches and stuff like that, I like to make use of virtual outlets that make things more intuitive for things like top off, alarm notification, and things like that. So a virtual outlet is essentially an outlet that doesn't control a physical EB8 socket. It's kind of a virtual outlet that we add to the thing, give it a name, and it'll perform certain functions, can turn on and off automatically based on switch states, based on timers and things of that nature. And at this point what we'll do is we'll go in and create 8 virtual outlets. The way that we do that is we go into the APEX controller, we go into module setup here, and we select a module that we want to add module. In this case it's going to be an EB8. We're going to give this an address of A5 since we've already got something at 1, 3, 4, whatever. I'm just going to give it an arbitrary outlet. Add module. Okay, so again what we did is we selected DC8. There's other things in here. If you wanted to add 4 virtual outlets, you can add DC4. DCs, AquaSurf, that kind of stuff, those are legacy things, not the lunar simulator, but the new lunar sims are plug and play through the Aquabus, so you wouldn't go through this process. But by adding that DC8, when I selected add module, if we go here to configuration outlet setup, there's going to be 8 new outlets there that are virtual. And in this case, like 1, 2, these are all our virtual outlets. Now we're going to give these things some names that are going to be useful. One of these is going to be called add water. And control type is going to be advanced. And we're going to use this for our ATO. Now, to make things simple, I'm going to log in, or I've got all my own programming here for my existing APEX, and I'm going to basically just copy and paste this to keep my life simple instead of hard coding things. Again, these are for virtual outlets. So let's see here, where is add water? There is my programming here. Okay, so switch 1 in his case is the is our ATO float switches. So what this is saying is if switch 1 is open, then the pump is ATO pump, or in this case add water will be off. If switch 1 is closed, then it'll turn on. Min time here, basically what that does is it means that the float switch has to remain in the state for a minimum of 3 minutes before it'll turn on. So min time 03 or 0030 means that, you know, if there's water bouncing around in the sump and the float switch kind of bobbles, we don't want the pump turning on and off, on and off, on and off because of that stuff. So it's going to have to remain in a specific state for 3 minutes before the pump will turn on. And I know it's a little counterintuitive here, min time 3 minutes, then off, but that just happens to be the way it works. And if you want more about these kind of statements, a great reference for programming is the APEX or the Neptune APEX Comprehensive Reference Manual that is available at neptunesystems.com under the Support tab and Documents. Also, another terrific reference is the Neptune APEX official forum, which you can get to, again, from neptunesystems.com. If you click on the support tab, you'll see a link there to the forum. And the community forum is a great place where there's tons of APEX experts there. If you post a question, they'll be there to help you. And more importantly, if you use a search function there for something that you're looking for, guaranteed somebody else has asked those questions and the answers will be there. So take advantage of those tools. The comprehensive reference manual is an invaluable tool for programming your APEX, and if you're going to get involved in an APEX, that's the first thing you should download and review is a comprehensive reference manual. It's very well laid out, and it covers pretty much everything. Use the index in there to find what you want to learn about, and it's covered in there. So we've now created a virtual outlet for add water that our float switches will control. So now that we've done that, we want to go to our ATO outlet here. I've already plugged it in, and that's in 3_4, outlet 3_4. Again, you get to that from outlet tab here, ATO. And I'm going to create a quick program in here that references that virtual outlet. Let me go back to my programming just to keep it nice and simple. Add water, where is my top off up here? Normally I wouldn't copy and paste, but it makes my life much easier. And we'll get into other means of programming, because there is kind of a wizard in there for basic programming, which I don't use, but it makes it very easy for first-time users. Okay, so I have very comprehensive programming in here. Again, I've got a little deferred here, which basically will mean that this outlet will not turn on for 3 minutes. I've also got a min time statement here that makes it run for 15 minutes. In Jim's case, we're not going to do that. I'm going to do a min time here of 3 minutes, which means that the pump's going to run for 3 minutes. It won't run for, if it takes 60 seconds to top his water off, I want it to go a little bit extra so it adds a little bit more water. We don't have water bug in there. That is my leak detection thing. We don't have salinity. Really what I should have done is gone in and created these additional virtual outlets right now, which I really need to do, because otherwise I'm going to get an error here. So let's see here.
You are 6 minutes in.
All right, well, go ahead and so anyhow, I've got to go ahead and create some more virtual outlets for some of the other functions, like sump to full, sump low, breakout box unplug, which is a fail-safe. That's that one little connection in there that I added to our breakout box that'll allow me to create an email alert and stuff like that should the breakout box be unplugged. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quickly, get his virtual outlets set up. And then the next step will be setting up the regular outlet. So rather than boring you with a bunch of advanced stuff, I'll get that stuff done right now, and then we'll get into the basic programming.
At some point, There comes a time in everyone's professional career where they must move forward. They must embrace that next leap of technology. I've been building and maintaining aquariums for 31 years, and I've always shied away from the latest gadgets, the newest lights, those high-tech fancy controller systems. I didn't get on board initially because I knew they were not long-term field tested. But even later, I still avoided these controllers and monitors because they seemed overly complex, and no surprise, I'm the furthest thing from a techie kind of guy. After now being introduced to the APEX system by Scott, I realized that 2016 was the year for me to have my electric moment. So what changed? Neptune Systems has been creating aquarium monitoring and controlling systems for nearly 18 years. So they've been around for a long time. But over the last few years, they snuck up on me and created a system to monitor your aquarium from anywhere in the world and control all the devices without having to be an electrical engineer. Okay, so you've got my attention now. The system is called APEX, and the cloud-based software it comes with is called APEX Fusion. APEX Fusion is the recent improvement that has made it so super simple. Using the step-by-step Get Started guide, the APEX was easy to install and get connected up to their APEX Fusion cloud-based control. In only a matter of minutes, I got the basics going and could monitor all the tank's vital signs: temperature, pH, ORP, salinity, water levels, leaks, and tons more from anywhere in the world. It'll even send me text messages. That 24/7 monitoring is key because it's the insurance policy against the top failures that will destroy not only your livestock, but your ultimate enjoyment of the aquarium hobby as well. If that alone was not enough, the APEX is the Swiss Army knife for your tank. It can control many different aspects of the aquarium that often require many discrete pieces of equipment. This can save tons of money, from pump control to dawn to dusk dimming of lights to dosing control. It does it all. My revelation for 2016? I think the APEX is a key component of a successful aquarium. And remember, if I say it's easy to set up and use, that says it all. One of the best things about going with an APEX is that you become one of the tens of thousands of other owners that love helping each other out. Maybe you get stuck, or maybe you just want to simply take on a new DIY project. Whatever your question is, the Neptune Systems Community Forum brings all of those thousands of users together to help you answer it. Many of the things discussed in this video series are also covered there in various posts. Or add your own question and start the conversation. That's forums.neptunesystems.com.
All right, welcome back. So we've got all our programming done. Kind of give a run through here. Just kind of explain some things. The only thing left to do is going to be the lights, which we'll deal with here in just a little bit. But let's start with our return pump here. Basically, I've got that set to be on all the time, and You can go in, I use advanced programming here. Again, we're in the default APEX web interface, and there's two ways to view this, obviously through the default interface, which I like, or Fusion, which I use as well. When you're setting up, you can choose different types of devices. It's kind of the wizard, if you will, and you can go in and say, you know, it's a pump, and you know, basically set some basic programming parameters in here for a pump, which really aren't all that relevant. Feed timer, if you hit the feed button, you're going to feed, you want to shut your pump off. You know, you can set those kind of things in there where the pump will shut off when you hit a feed timer and feed your tank. We're not using any of that. Again, I use advanced programming here. His pump will stay on all the time. Protein skimmer. You know, there's not a function in there for protein skimmer, but the way the protein skimmer is set up is to stay on. Now, if his return pump is off, the protein skimmer will shut off, because we want that to shut off when the return pump shuts off. The sump level is going to be overly full. The skimmer would then overflow. We have a float switch in there for sump too full, and when that switch, or when that outlet sump too full is on, that means that there's too much water in the sump. We want this protein skimmer to be off so it doesn't overflow. So we've set a little program in there for that. And sump too full is a virtual outlet, which I touched on earlier. When the float switch for the high water level in the sump is activated, sump too full turns on, and that'll shut his protein skimmer off. We have his ATO set up here, his ATO pump. For adding water, we used a virtual outlet called Add Water. When it senses that the float switch is too low, or the ATO float switch is too low, then Add Water turns on. When Add Water is on, his ATO pump turns on. It will not turn on for 3 minutes, so that means that the float switch or the Add Water virtual outlet has to be on for 3 minutes, so that if there's any bouncing around, or if he's doing something in a sump that's, you know, creating some turbulence, the pump for the top off is not going to turn on and off. So we have a 3-minute defer in there. When the outlet is off, the ATO turns off. If his return pump is on, we don't want the outlet turning, or the ATO turning on, so there's a line in there. If outlet return pump is off, then off. If the sump is too full, then the ATO turns off, because that could be a sign that water siphoning, which won't ever happen with this, or something else. No reason to have ATO turning on if the sump's too full, which should never happen anyways. If the breakout box is unplugged, that was that little red jumper that we put in the breakout box earlier in the episodes, the ATO pump is off, because that could mean that the breakout box became disconnected. We don't want the ATO pump turning on. And in his case, the ATO pump will run for a minimum of 3 minutes. So I'm going to make that min time 3 minutes, so that the ATO pump doesn't just turn on for 60 seconds and then shut itself off. Let's see, we do have his LEDs plugged into the system. They are set to stay on. Again, if we wanted to, if it was a regular light like a metal halide or a actinic fluorescent type of light, you can go in here and use a wizard, select light as the type, and tell it when you want it to come on, when you want it to turn off, and if you want a temp setting in there that shuts the light off when the temperature gets too high, so that you're not using lights to heat the tank more. Kind of an emergency sort of fail-safe. Again, we're not using that, so I'm not going to worry about that. I have his light set to stay on, or the light outlet to stay on, because we're going to use a 0 to 10 volt controller to control his lights turning on and off. We have this chiller plugged in to the EV8 as well, and the chiller is there basically as a fail-safe. So his chiller has a thermostat on it, and at 82 degrees his chiller is going to turn on, and you're probably scratching your head going, well, 82 degrees is too hot. Well, really, it's not too hot. Most of the ocean's reefs in tropical places, typically in the summer, are 82 degrees, 83 degrees, sometimes even higher, as high as 85 degrees. So 82 is an acceptable temperature in a reef tank. Some deep water fish may not like it, but I found that for the most part fish are just fine at 82 degrees, and I allow my tank to run on its own. I don't need a chiller, I don't need a heater in my tank. In the summertime it might hit 82 degrees, in the wintertime it's down as low as 75. If he wants to take it a step further, now that we have an ATO, we can always get a clip-on fan in there to blow across the water in the sump, and that'll actually do evaporative cooling. That'll keep his temperature low as he needs it and not need the chiller. So that'll be something that we may add down the line, a couple cheap $8 Walmart clip-on fans, and we'll basically tell him to turn on at 82 degrees and turn off at 80 degrees. It'll blow air across the sump. That'll cause some evaporation, which will cool his water. And then it'll save him on his electricity bill. So, chiller outlet, which is acting as a failsafe, the chiller will get power at 81.7 degrees. The chiller will lose power at 80 degrees. At 82 degrees, the thermostat on the chiller will turn it on. So effectively, the Apex is acting as a failsafe for if for any reason the thermostat on the chiller sticks, his tank will never drop below 80 degrees. The outlet to the chiller will automatically shut off. His hogs, those are his algae scrubbers. We have those set to turn on at 8 o'clock, and they're going to shut off at 2 o'clock. That gives them 18 hours of photo period during the day, or rather at night, and they'll overlap a little bit onto his display lighting, so that for the most part they're running at night and off for the majority of the day. Also, I have them set to shut off if his tank temperature for whatever reason hits 83 degrees, like his chiller failed. We're not adding additional heat into the tank from his algae scrubber. His feeder. We have his feeder program. We have the AFS in there. Every day at 2 o'clock, it's going to do one feeding of pellets. You can see here, drum rotations is one. You can change the drum rotation so it puts more food in. We're doing one drum rotation and one feeding a day. We also have it set to a feed timer, so we can go on the display and say feed A and it will feed. Last thing is going to be email alarms. I don't think we really need any sound alarms, but we have an email alarm in there. So our alarm for him that he's going to get emails on are going to be if his temperature hits 82.7, obviously something is wrong. In fact, I should change that to 82.5. If his temperature is below 75 degrees, he's going to get an email alarm. If his sump is too full, he's going to get an email alarm. If his sump is too low, he's going to get an email alarm. If his return pump is shut off, he's not going to get an email alarm because that might cause his sump to be too full. So we don't, if he's doing maintenance and he shuts his return pump off, he doesn't need to be alerted that his sump is too full. If his breakout box is unplugged, he's going to get an email alarm. Any of these alarms will be deferred for 3 minutes, meaning that the state of sump too full, sump too low needs to be in that state for 3 minutes, so that in case he's working the sump and he bumps a float switch, we don't want him to get an inadvertent alarm immediately. Therefore, we'll have a defer where it has to stay in that state for 3 minutes. So that covers the basic programming on the Apex. Again, if you have questions about programming, I have to stress, the Apex manual, the comprehensive reference manual, is a great place. It has lots of programming examples, has all the setup information and everything you need on setting up your Apex. The NeptuneSystems.com forum that you can find from NeptuneSystems.com on the support tab is another great reference site. Lastly, if you want great references on programming, I'll direct you to reeftronics.net. That's reeftronics.net. There are lots of users there with their Apex connected. If you go to there and you look at the list of users, as you can see here, many different users will come up. You can click on any one of these. My programming can be found under Scott L. If you go down to Scott L, my status is here, my programming and other stuff. You can scroll right through it and see all kinds of information as well as other Apex user stuff. So, on that note, we will conclude this episode on the Apex setup. On the next part, we're going to cover a little bit more into Fusion and in particular, setting up his Reef Bright LEDs. Thanks for watching. We'll keep moving forward and stay tuned for the part on Reef Brights and Fusion.